you're introducing me. Ah.
All right, just joking. I'm going to keep that continuing. Sorry, no. I'm actually the chair for the next sessions of the afternoon. So I would love to introduce you to Nicholas, a good friend, a esteemed colleague, actually, and a person that has been around the Python community for a lifetime, involved in education, creator of the Mu editor, code grades, and a lot of amazing things. Welcome, Nicholas, and thank you.
Thank you. Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay? Yes, you can. Okay. So I'm Nicholas. I'm a principal engineer on the PyScript team at Anaconda, which makes Fabio my manager. So doesn't he look dapper in his yellow coat and things? This is a personal talk, however. It's not actually anything to do with PyScript. And what I want to do today is pay attention to teaching, learning, and the place of software within our culture. Or perhaps, I mean, the place of culture in our software. So a little bit about me. I'm actually a classically trained musician. This is me in my natural habitat. I'm a heavy brass specialist and orchestral musician. And in this talk, music will be a stimulating foil and contrast to the world of software. And it sort of provides a metaphor that's powerful, not data-driven, but the important thing is that we can learn interesting things about our world by using such metaphors. Another aspect of my background is that I used to be a school teacher in the UK. This is me. I'm 23 years old, and I've just been appointed as a head of music at a secondary school near London. I used to teach in inner-city schools and things like that. Nobody told me that the tie was a compulsory part of the school uniform, so on my first day I went around without a tie and things like that. I also went on to study philosophy of education as well, things like that, while I was a teacher. Then I became a software engineer, and I still teach. This is me at EuroPython a couple of years ago, helping out with Beginners Day, okay? This is not my first time in the United Arab Emirates, nor in Dubai. Many years ago, when I was a professional musician, I went on tour a couple of times. And this is me, somewhere in the desert, halfway between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, taking a rest stop. So that's me and my quintet ages ago. So I want to start by focusing on what's the usual narrative that we have around computing. I did some research on GITEX, and what eventually became this amazing conference started in around 1979, and this is a picture from a book from 1979 about artificial intelligence, okay? And much as it is today, the future is full of utopian potential to be unleashed and things like that. And back in 1979, the year 2000 felt like it was far into the future. So actually, what did the world look like in the year 2000? Well, thanks to archive.org, I managed to go and find the website for GITEX. This is what this conference looked like to the web in the year 2000. It's a classic website of its time. Now, the big thing at GITEX that year was Sun Microsystems and the Sun Ray. Who remembers the Sun Ray? Three or four. Sun no longer even exists, yet it was huge back then, okay? And then, of course, this is the website today. How the web has changed, that's what I want to know. And yet the future is still full of utopian potential to be unleashed and all of that sort of stuff. And just like 1979, it's full of robots. So the question I want you to be thinking about for the rest of this talk is, what will GITEX look like in the 2040s, in 20 years' time, okay? Will the future still be a utopian dream? Or perhaps that tells us more about human beings and our optimism, more than anything to do with the future of technology. I'd like to put a disclaimer on this slide. This is the only accurate slide in the presentation, and perhaps all we can say for certain. Heraclitus was a pre-Socratic philosopher, and one of his tiny aphorisms is change is the only constant, and I think the previous slides showed us that. And I like this quote from Niels Bohr, the physicist. It's difficult to predict especially the future. Okay? So I think we can say with some confidence that in 2040, we're going to have a hard time predicting what that's going to be like, and we can also tell it's going to be very different. But one of the things that I think will be still correct is what Mark Andreessen said famously, and that is software is eating the world. Mark created the Mosaic browser, which eventually turned into Netscape and then hence Mozilla and so on. Other people have an opinion about this as well. This is Doug Rushkoff. The real question is, do we direct technology or do we let ourselves be directed by it and those who have mastered it? So Doug's point is that ignorance of technology disempowers you in today's world. And if you can code, you have autonomy to make the digital world as you see fit. So this is why education and thinking about coding culture is so important. Because asking what sort of education we want is the same as asking what sort of society we want to become. Very deep thoughts here. For education is the process through which we interact with our future colleagues, collaborators, and customers. And this was said by that great philosopher of education, me. So let's explore what we're doing right now in the world of technical education. So this is often the stock answer for how shall we do technical education. Learn to code, and we see a lot of that here today. So what exactly does that look like now? So a lot of work has gone into making hardware available that makes it easy for people to learn how to code. This is a BBC microbit, and I was involved in the creation of this thing. I was in charge of making Python run on it. It runs MicroPython, basically. And a few years ago, 1 million of these devices were manufactured, and every 11-year-old in the United Kingdom got one. They were lost behind a lot of sofas, I can tell you. But what do you do with it? Nobody asked the teachers what they wanted. I should know, I was kind of part of the project. So we need to also think not just about the hardware we give learners, but the software as well. So what does that look like? Well, classic is Scratch. We're trying to meet folks where they are. This is, of course, aimed at young coders, okay? And these young coders might have underdeveloped literacy skills. They might not be able to type and things, but they can drag and drop blocks around and make the cat do a roly-poly. So they're learning the concept. This is EduBlocks from Anaconda, and it's the same sort of concept. You're moving blocks of code around. And in this case, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see that it's actually generating Python code as well. Now, the advantage about this is that these blocks can only fit together in a certain sort of a way, so you can't get syntax errors, okay? Thus making it easy to build your Python code. And it also works just in the browser. And now that we have our fragment of code, and by changing the blocks, we can see how the code changes as well. So we're learning how the concepts in the blocks map to the Python. We can run the code in the browser. This will be running on PyScript in the next release. And then, actually, we have the Mu code editor, which fell out of the microbit project. This is a proper code editor, but it's kind of like a code editor training wheels code editor, okay? We have deliberately simplified everything about an IDE. So there is a debugger. You can use the debugger in a kind of a simple sort of a way. We've limited deliberately that you can just step over code or step into code, things like that. And the actual inspector on the right-hand side, if we have a look, is being updated. So beginners are starting to get what it is to actually use the tools of the trade as well, okay? So a lot of work has gone into this, but other people have an opinion about what education should look like. So this is from the syllabus from the UK for GCSE, so this is what 16-year-olds do. There are two parts to your GCSE. The first one is a completely written exam of an hour and a half, and the second one is a completely written exam of an hour and a half, and you don't go actually anywhere near a computer and type any code in. This is a great idea. Actually, it's horrific. But anyway, I'm not joking. This is actually what a GCSE looks like in the UK. It's a terrible idea. So the community steps in. okay, is another way of getting people engaged. This is the wonderful Django girls that run events for beginner coders to help them get into technology. Transcode do the same, the London Python Code Dojo is for a bit more advanced users, and others, and they provide safe spaces where people can sort of get to learn coding. And of course, there are online courses that you can attend. We heard some speakers talking about that the last couple of days. There are endless hours and hours and hours of YouTube tutorials. And of course, there's that old classic, which is the Dead Tree book, which you can go and read. Some promise remarkably time-efficient solutions to learning Python in 24 hours. Could you believe it? While others claim to be comprehensive. And they also double up for doorstops, too. In fact, I have a friend who uses some of my O'Reilly books to adjust his monitor position. And every time I write a new book, his monitor gets higher. And finally, there are what people call boot camps that promise to turn a normal human being into folks like you and I, which is these weird programmers, in just 3 months with the aid of several £1,000s. I have to say the efficacy of these efforts is disputed. And sadly, investigative journalists found in 2021 that there are widespread fraudulent claims about the success rate of some of these places as well. So if you do a boot camp, please make sure you check that you're getting into a good, legitimate one, okay? So what do actual real-world educators, real teachers, think about all these efforts that have been gone into coding education? Well, this is Dawn. Dawn is a friend of mine, Dr. Dawn Hewitson. She runs the highest rated teacher training program for computing teachers in the United Kingdom. And when shown all of this, Dawn said there are just too many solutions. Where's the progress? We're making content, not progress here. So where is the progress? What does progress look like? How do we cultivate the skills, knowledge, and ways of attending to the world required to effectively become an autonomous and capable coder? This is a long-term journey to gain experience, a journey to experience. Could we, as coders, avoid reinventing the wheel and learn from other disciplines whose skills also require long-term investment of time and effort? So in a musical sense, we're asking the question of how do we get this young lady, this beginner violinist, into someone who looks more like this? This is Nicola Benedetti, the Scottish concert violinist. Or perhaps this, just a group of friends, amateur musicians coming together for a session, folk session in the pub. Or this is Karla Ramnath, the Grammy award-winning Hindustani violinist who comes from a long line of traditional Indian classical musicians. Or even this is my favorite, this is Apocalyptica. I feel I need to say Apocalyptica or something like that, but they are a cello quartet, believe it or not, that play heavy metal, okay? And they're awesome. So how do we get these young beginner people, they don't have to be young, these beginners, into the sorts of musicians that they want to be? How do we help them become that, okay? So I'd like to propose a thought experiment. What if we taught music how we teach programming today? How do we support this beginner fiddler to grow into the musicians? Okay, so I'm going to tell you an imaginary story. And remember the microbit? Well, the BBC are going to give everybody a tuba because everybody needs instruments, of course, okay? And if you just give them these tubas, they'll figure it out for themselves, right? Sounds silly when you say it about a musical instrument, doesn't it? Now imagine how that feels when you're talking about a microbit or a Raspberry Pi or something like that. Sadly, most of the tubas given to children were never used because it turns out most of these beginner coders didn't want to play the tuba in the first place, okay? And nobody asked the music teachers what they wanted either. Okay, and clearly you can get a GCSE in music without actually playing any music or listening to music, so long as you can answer music theory questions. That's a good idea, isn't it? So let's put that into the school curriculum. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let the community step up and see what happens. So a fantastic tuba girl called Rachel organized something recently called Oktoberfest. And the aim of Oktoberfest is to inspire folks to fall in love with the full-step instrumental framework called the tuba. I'm just changing the quotes from the Django Girls website into something musical here, okay? Oktoberfest organised free tuba workshops, create online tuba tutorials, and curate amazing first experiences with sousaphones. It's an absolute blast. And the mentors at Oktoberfest might suggest books like this. Teach yourself the bass tuba in 24 hours. That's going to end well, isn't it? Of course, if you want something a bit more comprehensive, you've got Getting Started with the Tuba at over 900 pages that you're going to have to digest over several months as well. Okay? Perhaps you're on the London Underground and you see an advert for something like this. Join our music boot camp in London. I have literally taken the word code and replaced it with the word music there and changed some of the other stuff. What do you learn there? Well, you learn theory about musical notes, how to play the tuba in the first octave, infrastructure like wearing a tuxedo so you look nice on stage, best practices like turning the page very quietly in the quiet bits, and the next steps are explained to you as well, like advanced concepts such as key signatures or time signatures. And out of the people who graduate from this, only out of the cohort of 50 people who started this, only 5 actually graduated. But out of those 5, 4 of them actually found jobs related to music, but didn't involve playing a musical instrument. So that little thought experiment shows you perhaps how what we do in our community looks to people who aren't coders, okay? Oktoberfest is a real thing, by the way. So what do musicians actually do? What could we copy as coders to make our journey to learning a lot easier? So I want to share and celebrate just one of the many examples of music education. This is Music for Youth. It's a charity based in the UK. There goes the thunder, rolling ahead. And they provide performance and progression opportunities. And all backgrounds and styles are welcome. It's a safe space to be creative. Participation in real music activities is made for you. Music mentors, here's an important aspect of this. People who are real professional musicians actually get involved and help people grow in this space, okay? And they are themselves a group of passionate musicians who embody a certain sort of inclusive musical culture to invite people in. And, of course, it's free. It's a charity. So, it's not just about learning music theory to become a musician. And should it really be for us all the narrow kind of academic aspects of learning to code when you're trying to teach people the syntax or the algorithms or the computer science? As we know, there's more to programming than just that. There are the practices and the culture and the things that we heard from Fabio talking about that as well earlier, okay? So here's another thought experiment. What if we taught programming like we teach music? Now, there's a thing. So I want to introduce John. John founded PyCon UK, and he asked me to set up an education track then. Yes, John was an amazing guy. Sadly, he lost his fight with cancer a few years ago, but he was a music fan like me, and he knew about Music for Youth, and we used that as the template for our Kids' Day. And what we wanted to do was attempt to embody the sorts of behavior, attitudes, skills, attention, and knowledge that we hoped to inspire new Pythonistas. We wanted them to see that this is a long, slow, and at times frustrating journey. If you're a coder, we've all been in that place, haven't we? But it's a journey made possible because folks, no matter their age or level of coding, were encouraged to step up and support learners. By taking these steps, learners encountered and practiced what it is to be a Python coder in an inclusive, supportive, and diverse community. It works! And between 2012 and 2015, each year we welcomed up to 50 teachers and over 100 kids to PyCon UK. We encouraged folks to sustain their learning journey, build from what they had encountered at the conference, and step in to our community, having learned those processes. And we wanted to behave in the same way that the music mentors behaved at Music for Youth. And we weren't the only ones to do this sort of thing. I want to tell you a story of one particular individual who benefited from this sort of attitude. This is Josh. Josh is 8 years old. It's a photo from a few years ago. And he's presenting at a local community-organized coding event in Preston, where he grew up, created by a teaching friend called Alan O'Donoghue. And he's explaining, much to the amazement of the assembled people, how he has made an operating system in Scratch. Now, you can go and find that, and you think, an operating system in Scratch, that can't be done. Well, that little 8-year-old did something that was very much like an operating system in Scratch, okay? Josh made a lot of friends at that event. And he grew, and he was encouraged, and here he is, age 12, and he learned the importance of engagement and compassion and cultivating a creative and playful attitude to technology. And in this slide, he's just announced a new initiative of his own devising, he's only 12 years old, called EduPython. And it aims to help kids like him get into coding. And things go well for Josh, because a couple of years later, when he's 14, he's invited to keynote at the Education Summit at PyCon US. And this is a huge honor for him. And he makes friends there as well. There's Josh, age 14. And then there's some clearly a beginner Pythonista called Guido sitting in the middle, learning from EduPython there. And then I also want to point out Les. Les was Josh's mentor. Les is the person in that photo who is embodying that supportive culture of helping folks understand not just, like I said, the technical details of coding, but you know, how you go about doing a pull request, how you behave, the sorts of things that you might expect when you're a programmer. Today, Josh is 19. This was taken a couple of weeks ago. This is Josh with Alan, who was the guy who created that first meetup where Josh presented his Scratch-based operating system. And Michelle is a friend of Alan's, and she was the first person he met at that event and made him feel welcome. This is another event in the north of England a few weeks ago. And what a journey. And this is Josh a few weeks ago. He's wearing an Anaconda t-shirt. That's because Anaconda acquired what EduPython turned into, which is EduBlocks, if you remember. That was the thing I was demoing at the beginning of this talk. Josh is only 19, and he's a colleague. And if you were looking very carefully at Fabio's slides, he said, yes, I'm the manager for the EduBlocks team. So, we're colleagues. This is the journey that Josh has been able to go on with the support and encouragement that I've been talking about. Josh learned by doing. Josh was supported by the community. And Josh fully participated in our coding culture. This is important. Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, kind of got it right, you know? What we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. Thus, we become builders by building houses and musicians by playing music, okay? You learn to be a coder by writing code, okay? So what patterns can we reuse from elsewhere, like music, for example, to help promote this sort of learning? So I want to introduce very quickly something called code grades, which is inspired by the music grades that we have in the UK. It's also a little bit like martial arts belts. So the white belt is the easiest or simplest belt. The black belt is more advanced. So you have different grades in music grades. Grade 1 is an easy grade to pass. Grade 8 is a very difficult grade. The same for coding as well. And this is my COVID project in collaboration with Ghanaian friends. So tomorrow, if you come along, you'll hear a talk by my good friend Manny, who's going to explain about some of the amazing things that they've been doing in Ghana, and it has been a real honor to work with them. So how does it work? Well, we become coders by doing the things coders do, and these are organized into grades. So each grade has a syllabus, and within each syllabus is a set of core concepts about what you do when you're programming. And you create a project that is for that particular grade. So you need to fulfill those core concepts for that project. And then once you've created your project, you create a sort of development diary, okay? It's a little bit like creating a pull request where you explain what's going on, okay? And as you build the first draft of your project, you add more and more evidence. Data, photos, things like that, okay? And eventually, you get a working first draft of your project. You've told your story of the project, okay? And you may even demo it with a video, for instance. And so this is starting to look a little bit like GitHub pull requests, right? And that's deliberate because you are practicing the sorts of processes that software engineers do, okay? This is the splatter cat getting blood curdling. Okay? Click the cat and it explodes. Now, this is the point of view of a mentor on the CodeGrades website. The mentor steps in once you've got your first draft and asks you questions and helps you triage bugs and figure out what's going on in your code. And over a period of time, you strike up a conversation, just like you do in a pull request on GitHub, okay? And then the mentor provides you with an assessment, okay? And the syllabus provides lots of different dimensions of measuring or helping folks figure out how they're doing. And at the end of it, you get marks out of 100, okay? And that particular assessment was done by Naomi Cedar, who's helping me test this with a real candidate, okay? So let's see, I'm going to skip that because we're running out of time. I was going to show you an actual great, I'll just show you, tell you what. It's going to be a lot easier, isn't it? So if I go, there we go. So this is from Khadija, who is in Ghana, and she started with that classic a Roman numeral calculator, a Roman numeral converter. And by the end of the project, she had a Roman numeral calculator, and she also got feedback, written feedback, results, so she could see where her strengths and weaknesses and things like that were. So code runs our world. Yet code isn't written for computers. We write code because we are human beings, imbued with ideas, imagination, and feelings. And code expresses our thoughts made digital, a medium for our values, cultures, and ways of life. So if you knew how to code, what would you create? For it's those who venture into the world of code who will be the ones creating our futures. What will your contribution be? The only way is to try. Now, remember this. I used to be quite a bossy teacher, so I'm going to set you some homework now. It's due in 20 years' time, or just under 20 years' time, sometime in the 2040s, okay? Technology, learning technical stuff is necessary, but it's not sufficient, okay? The technology we use today will look quaint in the 2040s. They'll look at blockchain and roll around laughing at it. Well, actually, nothing will have changed then, will it? But anyway, you get my point, okay? And your task, your homework, is to pay attention to a more enlarged, creative coding culture and education, because what we are doing is preparing people for that unknown future, because it's not going to be what we can see in these halls here, okay? Mentor folks in our community, focus on the humans and actual intelligence, not technical solutions or perhaps artificial intelligence. Because as Alan Kay once said, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Thank you very much. We have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Nicholas. Great talk, as usual. Any questions?
No, I can go and have my lunch then, you know.
Well, I have a question.
Okay, Fabio.
Where do you think, what do you think is gonna stick until 2040 as technology?
That's the point, is that if we're focusing on the technology, that's all going to be different. But if we're focusing on the sort of culture that we want to create around that coding, and you spoke about the Python community and how important that is, then we're helping people become members of that community. So it doesn't matter what's happening in 2040. We've got a cool place, a welcoming place, a respectful place where you can come and work and learn and build cool stuff. So I think that's the important thing that we need to preserve. And that's what things like CodeGrades and the work with the Ghanaian folk is all about.
Thank you. We have a question there.
Oh. Hi.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I loved it. It made me smile. I'm a coder, and a lot of people ask me, how do I get into coding? It's mostly grown-ups. Would you recommend the same tools, or would you recommend something different?
I can't.
A lot of grown-ups are also asking me, how do I get into code?
Yeah.
Would you recommend the same tools, or would you recommend something else?
So clearly, that was the point about giving everybody a tuba. Not everybody wants to learn the tuba. I mean, I love playing my tuba and things, but so you need to be wise about this and figure out what does that person need, okay? And it's going to be different for each person. There is no right answer. In fact, the thought that there might be a right answer is probably a deeply problematic attitude to have. This is a process with which you engage. It's not a problem that you solve. Okay.
Thank you, Nicholas. A big round of applause, and we're preparing for the next speaker.